Hey guys, Jesse here. So in this video, I want to talk to you about how to choose the best longboard for commuting. So if you're looking into riding your longboard to work or to school or to town on a daily basis, going to the store and so on, you need a longboard that's fit for commuting. And that may be slightly different from choosing a longboard just for cruising around the beach or cruising around town. You need a board that's pushable. You want a board that's relatively stable and that rolls over small obstacles and ground imperfections pretty smoothly. You also want a board potentially that's maneuverable if you're going to be riding through tight city areas and on sidewalks. You may want a board that's portable and that's storable. So these are a lot of different qualities that you may be looking for in a single board. But first, why would we want to commute on a longboard? Well, first of all, longboarding is a lot of fun, and you probably know that if you're watching this video. Of course, longboarding is much faster than walking. It's also cheaper than driving, so you can trade in your car for a longboard, and that's going to save you a lot of gas money and a lot of hassle for parking and so on. Longboarding is also easier to commute on than a regular skateboard, which has a smaller wheelbase and harder wheels. So longboarding is more comfortable, although some people still prefer skateboards because they're so easy to carry around and because they can do tricks with them and so on. Now, a big question that often comes up is, why would I choose a longboard for commuting as opposed to a bike? And there are pros and cons to each, obviously. Bikes are bulkier than longboards. You need to lock them up outside the building whenever you get to your destination. Bikes often get stolen, whereas you can take your longboard inside the building and store it under your desk or in the locker or whatever. Also, riding a bike on a sidewalk in many places is against the law, whereas longboards are often tolerated. And mostly, longboards are easier to maintain than bikes and cheaper to maintain. A longboard has really simple components, including the trucks, the wheels, the bearings, so you can easily upgrade and clean up the bearings, whereas a bike will require more care and probably more money to maintain. Of course, a bike may be more efficient for getting from point A to point B, especially if you're riding uphill or if you're riding on dirt roads or on rough roads. And a bike may be more maneuverable as well, but longboarding has this great surfing feeling that if you get hooked on it, you won't be able to do without. But of course, longboarding is not for everybody. That's more of a personal choice. Another very good reason to commute on your longboard is that it's a fantastic workout. I mean, it's a whole body workout, and basically your transportation will double up as your gym. You'll be working out without even noticing it on a daily basis, and that's really fantastic. Longboarding can be done at pretty much any age as long as you're reasonably fit. The last reason I want to mention for commuting on a longboard is the social aspect. It's a great way to meet people. There's a large group of people that commute on wheels on a daily basis, on bikes, on skates, on scooters, on regular skateboards. So there's a nice community, and it's easy to meet people and make friends this way. Now, for you to be able to choose the best longboard for commuting, you need to understand the main techniques that you're going to be using on a daily basis when commuting to work or school or whatever. The first one is long distance pushing. It's going to be the main way you propel yourself on the longboard by kicking with your foot, usually the back foot, while you squat on the other leg, the one that remains on the deck. So you need to actually build your balancing skills and maintain your center of gravity stable while you're kicking with your back leg. If you're riding Mongo, then it's going to be the other way around. You're going to be kicking with your front leg and squatting on your back leg. This technique requires some practice, and it can be quite demanding over long durations or over long distances. So you need to really master it if you're going to be commuting on a daily basis. Some commuters try to master the skogging technique. Skogging as in skating and jogging, which means using alternate legs to push. So you push with your right leg and then with your left leg, and that gives you a more balanced kind of workout and a more efficient one. The second technique you may want to use is called long distance pumping. Not everybody uses this technique. What it is you propel yourself on your longboard without pushing, without ever setting foot on the ground. And you do this by swerving your body and shifting your weight from one rail to the next. And that impulses energy into your trucks and into your wheels. And so your longboard gains momentum and you get speed. And that's a very efficient way to propel yourself once you master the technique. But it does take a lot of practice and trial and error to actually master the technique. After a while, you get into a pace, and it's a really great experience and a complete workout. Some commuters combine long distance pushing and long distance pumping for an optimal combination, and that gives them a lot of power and a lot of efficiency over long distances and long rides. The third thing you need to know when commuting on your longboard is how to stop, because if you can't stop, you can't go very fast or very far. Obviously, you can just run off your board and run it out, and that works at really low speeds. But the most common technique used for braking is foot braking. That is, you squat on your front leg, just like for pushing, and you lower your back foot until the sole of your foot brushes the ground to create friction and slow yourself down. Very effective technique, but it does take practice to master. And again, it's about balancing on your front leg and maintaining your center of gravity stable, just like for pushing. Now, for higher speeds, foot braking might not work. If your commute is going through a big hill, for example, then you're going to need something much more efficient for braking and slowing yourself down. And that's going to be sliding. You need to learn how to speed check. And again, that takes a lot of practice to master. And in order to slide, you do need a lot of space around you. You need some protection gear because it can get quite dangerous. You can't do that in traffic or around crowds. Depending on how and where you're going to be commuting, you may consider sliding or slidability as one of the requirements when choosing the appropriate longboard for you. Okay, so now let's move along and talk about the features that you should look for when choosing a longboard for commuting. So the first thing you want is your longboard to be pushable. And in order for the board to be pushable, it needs to be as low riding as possible. That is, the deck should be as low to the ground as possible. And that can be found in drop-through longboards. The drop-through type of mount is when the trucks are mounted through the longboard deck. The other thing that works well for low riding is so-called dropped decks, also known as dropped platforms. What these are is decks that are actually lowered in the middle, so the truck mounts are higher up than the middle of the deck, and you're standing on the platform lower than the truck mounts. That's not the case with this board that you're seeing on screen. This is actually a top mount, and you can see the trucks are, the deck is mounted on top of the trucks, and the board is pretty much flat, although it has concave, but there's no drop here in the deck. So you want to look for a drop through and or a drop deck. Other things to look for in terms of pushability is deck flex. So you want your deck to be stiff, but not too stiff and not too flexy. You want a medium kind of flex so that will help your pushing. You also want bigger wheels because that will go faster and that will make you faster when commuting on a daily basis. So you want your wheels to be 65 to 70 millimeters in diameter at least. These are 70 millimeter wheels and they go pretty fast. You also want your wheels to be soft enough to roll over obstacles and cracks and bumps, like these wheels here, which are 78A in durometer. That's a pretty good durometer for everyday commuting. I mentioned earlier that you should be aware of some trade-offs, and one of these trade-offs is maneuverability versus stability. So if you have a longer wheelbase, typically a longer deck, then you'll have more stability, but potentially less maneuverability. Another factor in this trade-off is the trucks. So the trucks may be very turnable or more stable. That's to simplify things. If you look at this board right here, it has a pretty big wheelbase, pretty long wheelbase. This is a 36-inch deck, and you can see it's top mount. So it's pretty high up the ground, and that's another factor in turnability. So that makes it quite turnable. The trucks are pretty turny as well. It has a pretty tight turning radius, so I can make really small turns on sidewalks. So it's a nimble enough board, although it's not such a small board. But if I were to commute on a daily basis on bigger roads, then I would get a lower board, so a drop through or a drop deck, and probably I would get more stable trucks, less turny trucks, or maybe I would just tighten the trucks so that they turn less. So that's an important factor to consider depending on what you're going to be doing and what your priorities are. Again, if you want more stability, you want a bigger deck, a larger wheelbase, and less turny trucks, and you want a lower board, a lower riding board. If you want more maneuverability, then you might want a top mount board and turny trucks and possibly a shorter board. So if you're going to be riding in the city a lot, then you may want to get a 28 to 32 inch deck instead of a 36-inch deck like this one. On the other hand, if you're going to be riding on really long distances on straight roads, then you may want a 40 to 42 long deck with really stable trucks. And the last point I'll talk about is portability and storability. So if you're going to be carrying your board a lot, picking it up, for example, when crossing the street in crowded city areas, say a traffic light, or if you have to climb up some stairs, or you need to store it in a very small closet, then obviously you'll want to go for a shorter board and a lot more lightweight one. So perhaps a 28 or 30-inch long board and a composite deck or hybrid deck that's lighter weight than a full maple deck with 7 or 8 plies, which are sturdier but heavier. And again, here you have a trade-off between the convenience of carrying and storing a smaller board and the comfort of riding a longer board if you're going to be riding over long distances and long periods of time on a daily basis. So your commuting board may be longer and lower and more comfortable to ride, or it may be shorter and lighter and easier to carry and store. So that's all I have for today. I hope this has been useful. Again, if you're going to be choosing a longboard for commuting, just take into account all the factors that influence the way you're going to be riding and where you're going to be riding. So if you need a longer board for longer distances and long durations, or if you need a more nimble, shorter board for easily crossing the street, carrying it around, storing your longboard, these are all factors to consider. Make sure you make the right choices. Best of luck and see you soon.